The Vincast, Australia's premier wine podcast, is looking for sponsors. If you, as a listener or someone you know, is a developer of a fantastic piece of technology that is wine related, whether that be an app or a website, or indeed if you are an online wine retailer, then it is a great opportunity for you to connect with a very engaged wine audience who embrace new technologies and new modes of communications and sales, and get the message out about your unique story. Opportunities are endless, really. You can partner up with guests that I might have on the podcast, or partnering up with events and promotions that I've got hopefully in the works in the future. But really, it's just an opportunity to get the message out and get more people engaging with your piece of technology. So if this is something that you'd like to get involved with, or you know someone who would be ideal, please do get in contact. You can email me at thevincast@gmail.com, and let's work together. I'd love to hear from you. On this episode of the Vincast, I chat with Iwo Jakimowicz at his winery in the Margaret River, Si Vintners, and we talk about how he's changing people's perceptions of this classic Australian wine region in Western Australia. I also officially launched the new segment, Ask the Wino, and also I will be asking you a fun question that I want to hear your answers to at the end of this episode, so stay tuned. Hello, Vincasters, and welcome to the Vincast, episode number 51. My name is James Skersbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. And again, my apologies for not having an episode come out last week, but as I mentioned, I was on assignment. I actually took a bit of a break, went over to Western Australia. Partly I was there to catch up with some family and friends in Perth. Got the chance to visit some really fantastic restaurants and wine bars and try some stuff there. But I also rented a car and headed south. So I went to Margaret River for a few days. I stopped in Pemberton and Franklin on the way down to Great Southern. So it was really awesome to see. I'd never been to Western Australia before, so I was really excited to see a new part of Australia, a different side, both literally and figuratively, to what I'm, I guess, more familiar with over in the East Coast. Western Australia, whilst it doesn't have as much history as other states in Australia as far as wine, it's been around for about 40, almost 50 years now. And there's some really premium wines, very iconic names coming out of that state. And there's so much potential, particularly in sort of the Great Southern area for cool climate viticulture. For a long time, I think they were at the mercy of distance, of isolation, but there's some really exciting stuff coming out of that region, and it was great to be able to meet with a number of people and taste some wines. And of course, I took along my recording equipment and I recorded a couple of episodes, and the first of which you're going to hear today is actually the first time I've recorded in a winery, which is pretty exciting. But before we start with the episode, I just wanted to thank again my guests from episode 50. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I hope you enjoyed being on the episode. For those of you that were on it, it was really great for you to give up some time to chat with me, and it was great to hear from you on the podcast. Of course, as always, I love hearing from people, and I love when people tell me that they're sharing the podcast with other people. So you can, it's easy to do that via social media, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Twitter or Instagram or something like that. But it really does help me out when people actually rate and review the podcast. So if, as I think a good friend, Mr. Jonathan Brook, mentioned, if you could jump onto the iTunes store and find the podcast on there and give it, ideally a 5-star rating, and write some words if you like particular episodes, or if you want to hear about different topics, let me know. Now, once again, I would like to just thank Brad Lucas from Studio Glass Half Full for designing the new Vincast logo. I'm really, really in love with it, and it's already been great to have some feedback. People seem to really like it, and so I'm thinking maybe at some point I'd like to maybe get some merchandise, maybe, I don't know, T-shirts, obviously, maybe even a spittoon, something like that. If you'd like to see some Vincast merchandise, and if you have some ideas about where I could stick that logo on, that'd be fantastic. And I hope again you enjoyed the new theme music, which was written and recorded by Daniel Honan, otherwise known as the Wine Idealist. Definitely jump onto his website and subscribe onto that, because he brings out some really fantastic articles every week. Now, I wanted to officially launch, but I still haven't had anyone ask me a question yet. But the new segment, Ask the Wino. So if you do have a question you'd like answered about wine, or if it's for a particular previous guest, then I can get in contact with them. Please do let me know. If you're using social media, please use the hashtag Ask the Wino, or you can just send me an email, vincast@gmail.com. So as I mentioned, this week's episode is for the first time I've actually recorded in a winery, and it's with Iwo Jakimowicz, who's originally from Poland. I hope I didn't butcher his pronunciation of his name. And he's with his wife Sarah behind Si Vintners. They're really changing the face of Margaret River wine, using different techniques and different expressions of some still classic Margaret River varieties, which are really turning some heads both in Australia and overseas. So it was really fascinating to chat with him, particularly, having sort of taken a tour around the vineyard and tasted some wines, both from previous vintages and the most recent 2015 vintage. And I hope you enjoy the episode. Please do let myself and Ivo know if you did enjoy it. And stay tuned for the end of the episode, where I'm going to ask you guys a question that I'd love your answers for. Ivo, thank you for making some time for me, and thank you for welcoming me into your lovely little winery here in the Margaret River. And thank you for being my first sort of off-site or on-site, really, in winery guest for the Vincast.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for coming around and visiting.
So tell me, Ivo, I tend to start each episode asking my guests what their initial interaction with wine was, particularly in terms of what made you realise that you wanted to kind of pursue a career or a life, really. It's not really a career, it's more a life in wine.
Well, mine's a bit of a funny one, because I basically wanted to live in Margaret River. That was why I chose to make wine. When the university degree came out, one of the prerequisites was that you had to do work experience in areas such as Margaret River. That was when I was about 17. So that's why I chose it.
Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Poland, but I grew up in Perth.
So you migrated with your parents?
Yep, migrated in 1987.
Okay, so what was the work experience like? Why Margaret River? Was it the region, or was it something else?
I wanted to come here to go surfing, basically.
It brings a lot of people. I noticed just in town, lots of surfer types walking around.
Yeah, definitely. It's the majority of the population, I think.
So what was that work experience you did initially?
Oh, I just started coming down for pruning and hanging around wineries, essentially. And slowly got more and more involved and decided I liked it more and more.
Did you sort of do any form of studies or anything like that to kind of say, okay, I'm going to be serious about this. I'm going to be a winemaker. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly.
Yeah, well, it was a university degree. That's where Sarah and I met at Curtin University in Perth.
So is there a big kind of winemaking or wine studies program there?
Well, we were actually the first year it was offered, or first or second year it was offered in Western Australia. I mean, the main course is obviously South Australia or Wagga, I believe. But
Charles Sturt,
yeah.
And so being there for this sort of the early inception, I guess, how was your experience and Sarah's experience studying winemaking at a university?
Oh, look, being such young students, everything was so new, so it was an interesting experience. And I think what we both did was actually take a bit of time out from uni and start travelling and learning more about the other side of the wine business, which is doing vintages around the world and learning things from the winery end rather than the university end.
Were you going and doing vintages in Europe sort of together or at different places but at the same time?
No, totally separate paths. So we met at university. We weren't together or anything like that. And we both went off and did our own thing, cruising the world, vintaging, if you like. And I mean, we still are. We've basically, since 2000, each of us has done at least 2 vintages a year. So
early on, where were some of the places you were doing vintage in Europe?
Switzerland. I actually did a couple of vintages in Switzerland, of all places. The Italian part of Switzerland, which is, over the road from Italy, essentially, Ticino. It was a beautiful thing. And the guy, Werner Stuckey, who I was working for, was a consultant to Tuscany, so we were doing a lot of trips to Italy, checking some things out. And that's when I first really decided, geez, this is all right, this is what I want to do, cruise around and make a bit of wine. And he was a very small scale winemaker, I guess, kind of doing what we're doing now, making what he liked to make, and he was happy with.
And was it also kind of a lifestyle thing, that kind of just living and making wines and eating good food and that kind of thing that appealed as well?
Yeah, definitely. And and I think the more our palates developed and the more we worked in the wine industry, the more you realise what kind of wines you want to make, which aren't always what the company you're working for might want to make. And I think that was the first decision that we wanted to do something for ourselves.
You were back and forth between Australia and Europe, still studying, or were you started?
No, we both finished. I actually only finished my degree about 3 or 4 years ago.
How long did it take you to finish it?
About 10 years. It was a very slow, long process. I'd go back and do 1 or 2 units, and I was working as a full-time winemaker by that stage. So
learning by doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when you were back in Australia, where were you working?
I did various, to begin with, just some random vintages around the place, like Margaret River. I did a few, and then we actually started doing our own thing on a very small scale. Just we set up shop at a friend's shearing shed and bought a couple of little fermenters and an old basket press, and that was, basically made enough wine to sell to our friends and family, and that was vintages.
So, was it C from the beginning?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, C stands for Sarah and Evo, but it was basically we couldn't come up with anything, and we registered our business as S&I Wine Company, and then, as Australia does, it soon got abbreviated to C instead of S&I, and it also is the Spanish word for yes, which we spent half our life in Spain, so it was
At what point were you together and sort of wanting to start the little project for yourselves?
Well, once we started working together in Spain, and then, once we were in Spain, we were working over there, we decided, one day it'd be nice to settle down somewhere in Australia. We both wanted to live back in Australia, bring up a family in Australia. So we thought Margaret River's a great place because it's probably the closest wine region to our families. And, yeah.
How did you end up working in Spain?
A job opportunity. It was, we were at that stage. We were both travelling around doing vintages all over the place, and a great opportunity came up, and we took it. Which was, the job profile was, do you want to make wine out of old vine Grenache, 100-plus-year-old vineyards, and what winemaker wouldn't take that opportunity? So, yeah. It kind of started out as a vintage job, which became a bit more serious, and we did about 7 vintages straight for the guys over there, and then now we're doing our own thing. So with some friends, we've bought a couple of hectares of vines and do the same thing as we do here, basically.
So, what was your experience working in Spain in Spanish wines?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, as far as like the wine industry in Spain, surely would it be different to the wine industry in Switzerland or the wine industry in Italy, or the market? Like, at the time, what was kind of the idea behind how you were making the wine?
I mean, we got employed by an American importer, so 100% of our production at that those early stages was for America, so there was definitely a set protocol, and things like certain journalists over there were quite influential, and
So it was being made to a certain palate in a way.
oh, definitely. Look, the bulk of wines. We did some quite large volumes in the end. To start with, was quite a fun, small little project, but then it got quite large. And yeah, of course, like the large volumes had to be made to a certain style. Some of the smaller single vineyard stuff was a bit more of our own, down our own path. But
Slightly more passion project type stuff.
yeah, definitely. But essentially, that's why we sort of got fed up with it, because we wanted to do the whole lot like we'd like to do it,
And I can imagine, it would have been a particularly different experience making wine in Spain, for example, compared to here, as far as an old world kind of feel, but with a new world approach.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that is why we got employed. We were Australian winemakers going into an old world region, and they wanted some new world style. So that was, those years where a lot of, I think, Australian winemakers were employed, as the whole flying winemaker thing was happening, and that was the reasoning. So
in terms of apart from Margaret River, did you work any vintages anywhere else in Australia?
Yeah, my first ever vintage was actually in the Mornington Peninsula at Red Hill Estate, and then other than that, no, just in Margaret River. And then Sarah's done a fair few. She's worked in the Barossa for a number of years, and Hunter Valley.
Where's Sarah from originally?
She's from Perth also.
Okay. And as far as your parents or Sarah's parents, was there any kind of connection to wine, or were they at least wine drinkers?
Look, my family, definitely not. Sarah's, her grandfather was quite a passionate wine drinker. Her family is definitely, into drinking wine.
I mean, coming from a Polish family, I would imagine they're passionate vodka drinkers?
Yeah, a bit more down the vodka line. For sure. I know, now they have become a lot more interested in wine since I've become a winemaker, I suppose. And
in terms of living, in either in Perth or in Melbourne or Mornington Peninsula, and then over in Europe, were you discovering other wines as far as just drinking them and kind of finding affinities and things that you found particularly interesting that kind of influenced the way that you wanted to make your own wine eventually?
Well, I think to begin with, I was quite young, so everywhere I went, I guess I discovered that region and that particular winery where I worked, and that was, everywhere. I guess you sort of hone in your own style after a certain amount of years working all over the world.
What do you think was the biggest influences on your approach and philosophy as far as your own wines?
Look, I think a lifestyle thing initially. Sarah and I both, were into organic or being quite healthy, I guess, and that whole thing of seeing how much stuff actually gets put into conventional wines and vineyards and what gets sprayed on them. First it was a natural step to back off on any of that sort of stuff in the vineyard, and then it was kind of like, well, why should we be putting stuff in our wine when we've gone to all that effort to grow it organically or pesticide and chemical free in the vineyard. So
you took very much like a kind of a vigneron approach as far as having control from start to finish and not necessarily making the wine or just growing the fruit, but actually having control over what's going on in the vineyards and then what you're actually capturing in the wines.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, look, you hear it all the time, but our approach is definitely to grow our wine rather than to make it. It's all about the vineyard. If you can't make a great wine out of average fruit, so we're 100% focused on the vineyard side of things.
So when you started S&I, were you purchasing fruit?
Yeah, definitely. We were purchasing fruit, obviously trying to get organic if we could, but it didn't necessarily happen to begin with because not everyone likes to grow organically.
Why do you think that is, particularly in the Margaret River?
I think there's a bit of a misconception thinking that it's more difficult to be organic. I mean, in the end, it's not really. It's just a mindset. So
I think of it as actually less work. It's you have to be probably more observant and less kind of recipe based, I guess. But it's more about doing a bit of hard work to begin with, and then allowing the vine and the vineyard to find its own equilibrium and protect itself.
Yeah, definitely. You nailed it there. You have to be more observant, and you have to be very careful to make sure the sprays that you are putting on, your sulfurs and your coppers are put on at the right times, and you don't miss any sprays, and that's it. There's actually no need for any of the other synthetic stuff. And I mean, obviously, things like irrigation and putting synthetic fertilizers and things on, that's a choice to lower your crops, I guess, from a conventional point of view. But you don't need to do that, I suppose, but we do.
And as far as the way you're making the wines, initially, did you kind of have an idea of having what may be considered less intervention?
Oh, look, we've always been that way inclined. Like, even working for other wineries, we've always been very minimalistic, if you like. I mean, you've got we do add sulphur to our wines, but, yeast, that was what you learn at university, was you must use packet yeast. And look, we used to do that. And then I suppose doing a few trials without it and we liked what we saw, and that's where we went. And then things like acids and tannins, we've just never really seen the need for that. So, and we just prefer the way a wine tastes without all those additives. And not to mention, we think it's a better descriptor of what your vineyard's showing, because by adding all those things, you're essentially changing the natural makeup of that vineyard.
So it's very much a philosophy of sort of nothing added, nothing taken away.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And as far as this beautiful property that we are currently standing on, which you were telling me before is one of the oldest plantings in the Margaret River, how did you actually manage to sort of stumble upon this plot and eventually get the opportunity to buy it?
Well, Sarah and I always preferred working with the southern end fruit. We just, we like the natural acidity it gives, and we were working down the road in a friend's shearing shed, and literally down the road, a couple of kilometres, and we were driving past one day and saw the property and came in and met the previous owners and got chatting, became friends, and it was for sale. So we took a long time. we couldn't afford it, and we worked and worked and begged and eventually he sold it to us.
Do you think that the how things changed in Margaret River is a lot to do with, I guess, economic reasons, but market reasons as well? Because just driving around the Margaret River, I've seen quite a lot of for sale signs, just not necessarily for vineyards, but for land. But in talking to some other people here in the Margaret River, apparently it's actually not that difficult to get access to fruit, for what, maybe a quarter or a fifth of what you would have paid for maybe even 5 or 10 years ago. Do you think that's kind of affecting a change in the Margaret River, which is somewhere I've considered to be quite, traditional for a long time?
Yeah, look, I think things like what we're doing, small family owned, it's allowing that to happen, because if the prices were still sky high like they were once upon a time, it still is an expensive region to buy in. But yeah, the real estate market definitely has had a downturn. I don't know if that's actually got anything to do with the wine industry in general. It's probably just the general state of the economy.
Sure.
But yeah, it's making this sort of stuff accessible, if you like. And you got to seek it out and want to do it. It's like you said, we could probably buy fruit a lot cheaper than what it's costing us to do this, but we get to do it our way. The way we want to, and no one's going to tell us any different.
Well, and ultimately the idea is that no one's going to be able to translate your site better than you if you're handling everything from start to finish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when you did eventually buy the property, what was already on the vineyard? Why was it so special? And then kind of how did you start to put your kind of impact on the site?
Well, it was the previous owner ran it minimally. It wasn't organic by any means, but it was definitely on the minimalistic side of things. So there was a few blocks that were actually basically he'd let go for a couple of years. So we took it on and started reworking. So from the day we took over, there hasn't been any chemicals on here, apart from sulfur and copper. The day we walked through the gates, it became organic, and then we slowly introduced biodynamics and the winery. The shed was half of the shed was here, and we've added bits and pieces as we go along and run out of room.
Have you actually planted any in addition to what was already here?
No, not yet. We're about to put some plantings in this year.
So what varieties are planted here?
Cabernet, Chardonnay, Pinot, and Semillon. And a little bit of Merlot. We've got about half an acre of Merlot.
So Pinot is possibly not a variety that's well known from the Margaret River. Is there much really in the region?
No, there's not that much at all. Like there's a couple of the older plantings that have it. I think it was one of those things that back in the early 70s when people were planting, it was a trend more than anything. And we've got some here. We are a lot further south than the sort of the Willie Abrup area, I guess, if you like. Probably as the crow flies, it's over 50 kilometres. So it's essentially a totally different feel and climate down here. And Pinot seems to work for us. Majority of our Pinot goes into making our rosé, and we play around with a bit of red wine making with it, if the vintage allows.
But the other varieties in general are fairly classic Margaret River. Obviously there's quite a bit of Cabernet, there's quite a bit of Chardonnay planted throughout the region. How did you feel that you wanted to distinguish yours from the majority of others? How are you having a different approach to how it's being expressed?
Look, we're not hiding the fact that we're south, so a little bit cooler if you like. So we're having a slightly different flavour profile. I think our Cabernets are definitely not anything like the stuff that comes out of Willie Abrup. Not that I love the Willie Abrup Cabernets, but I think that's what we set out to do, was to make a southern wine, if you like.
Do you think that there is a lot more opportunity to make quite distinct sub-regional wines in the Margaret River?
I think so. I mean, it's a huge region. It goes all the way from Dunsborough right through to Augusta. So that's a fair few kilometres. If that was in Europe, there'd be 3 different regions crammed in there. So I think, yeah, definitely.
As far as this particular part, what's the general profile of I would think that the cooler climate, it's a bit cooler down here, so possibly it's a really excellent area for Chardonnay. But having tasted your Cabernet and some other Cabernets from down here, it's a slightly different kind of profile. How would you describe the Cabernet profile from this part of Margaret River?
Well, I suppose probably a touch lighter, maybe half a percentage lower in alcohol, and a brighter acidity. I think that's an important factor.
And as far as the Chardonnay, obviously, again, Margaret River is very, very well known for its Chardonnay, and gets a lot of attention for it, around the world. In fact, what's your approach as far as the Chardonnay? How are you working with the Chardonnay?
Like the rest of it, it's very hands off. We let the vineyard do its thing and bring it into the winery and let the wine do its thing. So there's no secrets. It's just a very we press it and then we bottle it.
Pretty straightforward, really. Yeah. But you're doing a couple of quirkier things, which are definitely very much against the grain as far as the Margaret River. Things like the Lello, which I know, particularly in Melbourne, where obviously I'm from, it's got a bit of a cult following. Can you tell me a little bit about the Lello?
Yeah, so we like to play around with a lot of skin contact for white wines. The Lello is the idea behind it is to make a skin contact white. So we're basically experimenting with making our white wines as most people would make reds. So that we just love the texture of it, and it's an enjoyable drink. So we and some of the wines that we like to drink are like that. So we thought, why not have a go?
One of the more controversial things that I feel is is particularly known in Margaret River is that the wines often aren't necessarily designed to be consumed straight away. You know, they a lot of wineries will talk about, oh, you know, you need to put them down, that kind of thing. What's your opinion as far as, you know, drinking window? Do you feel that your wines age well, or, you know, do you like the idea of just sort of releasing wines and they're delicious, you know, straight away?
Yeah, look, I think there's two different approaches to that. There's definitely your sort of more classic styles, like your big Cabernets and things, which just need a bit of time to, you know, in the bottle and in the cellar, I suppose. But yeah, we're definitely playing around with some younger styles, some earlier drinking sort of wines, which can get thrown into bottle fresh and be enjoyed fresh. Yeah, it's just a whole different approach, I guess, a bit more of that European thing, and it is something we just enjoy drinking.
Now, of course, I've met you a couple of times, particularly at some of the wine fairs. Last year, obviously, Rootstock. I'm assuming that was the second time you'd been there. And then this year, returned to Terroir. You know, this weekend in Melbourne, obviously it'll be last weekend by the time this episode comes out. There's the handmade event, and then there's going to be Rootstock again in November. Do you think that there is really great value in running those kind of events? You know, sort of doing something a little bit different, introducing consumers to this other side of wine, and then, you know, also getting together with these other producers and sort of, you know, having a meeting of minds.
Yeah, definitely. I think those events are great. It's great to meet other like-minded producers, whether they're from the same region or a different region, and get together and have a chat. And you know, like you said, it's great to be able to educate the consumers and tell them what we're all about.
And as far as the availability of the wines, of course, the wines are, you know, sold here in Australia, but you're also exporting the wines?
Yeah, we do a lot of exporting, mainly Japan, the UK, and we've just started in America.
Fantastic. So as far as people getting in contact with you and the wines, and then ideally, you know, getting out and buying them and drinking them, enjoying them, what's the best way for people to find out more information about the Si wines?
Probably the best way is to write us a good old email.
Isn't it funny that now we consider emails to be quite old-fashioned?
Yeah, that's about as technological as we get.
And as far as, what about like social media? You have much of a presence on stuff like Twitter and Instagram?
Oh, look, we do have an Instagram account and a Twitter account, but I can't say we're hugely active on it. We try to be, but we don't have much phone reception where we are, so it makes it a bit hard.
I have noticed that. But look, I do really appreciate you welcoming me here, as I said, and also making a bit of time for us to have a good chat. Thank you very much. I look forward to, obviously, you coming back over to Melbourne and seeing you in Sydney in Rootstock. But look, from what I've been tasting today, the 2015 vintage is looking pretty great.
Great, yeah. Thanks for your time, and again, thanks for coming out and taking the time to check it all out.
Thanks, Ivo. And thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Vincast with me, James Skersbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. So the question for episode 51 is, obviously you've heard me ask many or almost all of my guests what their first interaction with wine was that set them on that path. So I want you to tell me, what was it that made you get so interested in wine? Was it a particular bottle? Was it someone who introduced you to wine? Was it a particular context that you were in? Let me know. You can do that on social media. Follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Intrepid Wino. You can follow the podcast at The Vincast. You can send an email to thevincast@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Intrepid Wino, or you can hit me up on my website, intrepidwino.com, where you'll find all the episodes of The Vincast, as well as lots of different writings that I've done in the number of years that I've been the Intrepid Wino. Of course, as I always ask, please, I would love for you to go to iTunes, the podcast section on your little iPhone. You can go to Stitcher or Play FM, subscribe to the podcast, and that way you'll get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available. Whilst you're there, of course, I would love for you to leave a rating and review, share it on social media, because it really does help get the word out about this little wine podcast here in Australia. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I look forward to having you on the next episode. But until then, bye.